I can remember you, child, as I stood in a hot white room at the window watching the people and cars taking turn at the traffic lights. I can remember you, our first fierce confrontation, the tight red rope of love which we both fought over. Hello and welcome back to GCSE Litcast. In this episode we are going to be exploring Catrin by Gillian Clarke. So, Catrin, written by Gillian Clarke, explores the complex tightrope relationship between a mother and daughter. This poem uses the physical act of birth as a kind of foundation to discuss the lifelong emotional struggle between the need for connection and the drive for independence between children and parents. So let's have a look at some of these big ideas. We've got this paradox, this kind of illogical connection of maternal love. The poem portrays love not as this sort of simple, soft emotion, but as fierce and almost confrontational as a force. Clarke highlights this paradox that to love a child is to eventually have to let them go, creating this permanent state of loving conflict. There's also this sense of identity and separation. A central theme is the struggle to become a separate individual. The poem moves from the literal physical separation of birth to the metaphorical separation of a teenager who asserts her own identity and suggesting, as a result, that independence is a goal that's constantly fought for by the child and resisted by the parent. There's also an invisible cord. So Clarke uses the umbilical cord as kind of a powerful metaphor for the emotional bond that persists long after the physical one is cut. This tight red rope of love represents both the security of the bond and also a restriction that it places on the mother and the daughter. And then we're exploring this sort of cycle of conflict by setting the poem in two distinct time periods, the hospital at birth and a modern-day argument. Clarke suggests that the struggle for independence and autonomy is a recurring cycle. So the glass tank of the nursery is replaced by the glass of the daughter's defiant stare, which kind of shows that while the setting changes, the underlying tension ultimately remains the same. And we also then acknowledge that motherhood involves a struggle that leaves a permanent mark. So both characters are tied by their shared experience of birth and the subsequent years of fighting to define their own spaces. So, in terms of a little bit of context, the poem is deeply personal and confessional and is written about Clarke's own daughter, Catrin. It captures a specific moment of tension when Catrin wanted to stay out late, and this prompted Gillian Clarke to reflect on the very beginning of their relationship. Gillian Clarke is one of Wales's most prominent contemporary poets. She's a former national poet of Wales, and her work frequently examines the domestic sphere, the natural world, and the intricate bonds of family. And it often uses clinical or quite stark imagery to ground these very emotional experiences. Written in the early 80s, or late 70s, early 80s, the poem reflects a shift in how motherhood was depicted, moving away from this really idealised version of birth to more of an honest and raw portrayal of the physical and psychological toll of birthing and raising a child. So we definitely have here that physicality versus emotion. The poem uses this kind of clinical hospital imagery, like a square stone room or blank walls, to ground the abstract emotions of love and frustration in tangible physical reality. There's also constraint and freedom, so the tension is built through images of being trapped or tied. There's rope, there's walls, there's glass, versus the desire to break or to separate. And there's also the continuity of time, so the shift from the past tense of the birth to then the present tense of the argument really shows and emphasises that the bond is an ongoing process of negotiation. It's not a one-time agreement or one-time event. So that's some context and some big ideas around the poem Catrin by Gillian Clarke. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to find out about any of the other poems in the anthology, then check out our episodes on all of them on our page, and plenty of other episodes to listen to and learn from as well. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. for listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. If you found the podcast helpful and would like to support us further, then the Ko-fi link in the description will give you an opportunity to tip us. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one.